Hello and welcome. You're watching Where Women Talk. I'm Nadia Giordana, and our guest today is Christian writer Meg Corrigan. She has a brand new book out, Saints with Slingshots. Think about that. Let's go talk to Meg and find out what this book is all about. Hi, Meg. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nadia. It's so nice to see you again.
Oh, it's always good to have you on the show. It's been a while since you and I have talked, and
It sure has. And I remember all that you did for me when I first became an author. You sat right here with me and hit the button when my first book went to publishing. So I thank you for that. 10 years ago, that was a wonderful kickoff. So thanks.
wasn't that fun? We had
It
a lot of
was.
fun pulling that book together, the formatting part, which is the
Yep.
part that I like.
Yep.
Yes, that was, oh my gosh, yes, that was 10 years ago. Well,
I know it.
you have another new book now.
I
Tell us
do.
the name of that, and what was that original catalyst that got you excited to do this book?
Oh, well, the name of the book is Saints with Slingshots 2, More Daily Devotions for the Slightly Tarnished but Perpetually Forgiven Christian. And Saints with Slingshots 1 began about 5 years ago when the Lord had laid it on my heart to write a daily devotional blog and put it out to the world. So I did that, and about March of that year, I was writing every day, some days all day long. And about March of that year, some of my friends said, "Oh my goodness, you got to put this in a book." And I had never thought of that. So then I thought, well, okay, that's cool. I'll have most of it written by, November, and I could just whip the rest together. And well, we went on vacation. We had some blocks of time where I didn't write. And by summer, I was like panicking. And I did write almost every day. And sometimes I wrote 4 and 5 400-word devotions each day. So I did get it done. I launched that book on November 1st with a big hoopla that we can't have now because of COVID. And that's how it got started. So I have now written 732 blogs because I started writing it weekly. And it took me a little longer to write the whole book because I was writing weekly instead of daily. But we finally got her done this year. I just finished about a week ago, and I have a few odds and ends to add to the book, but it will launch December 1st, the good Lord willing, and if the creeks don't rise. So that's that story.
I love that. And what 700, over 700, how in
Yep.
the world did you get that many ideas to write about?
Oh my goodness. Well, that first year, the Lord was so faithful to me. He gave me an idea or 5 every day. I mean, I would wake up in the morning and go, Lord, I don't know what I'm going to write about, and He'd bring something to my attention. So it's kind of been the same way. I have used my 30 plus years of experience as a counselor and social worker. That helped me come up with a lot of stories. I'll tell you some of my favorite ones later, and a couple of those that came out of that period. I also got ideas from family, friends, strangers, newspaper articles, books I had read, TV news shows, or just TV shows in general. Anything that I could come up with. I also had about at least 12 guest writers, mostly from our writers group that you and I belong to, but a few were others that wanted to contribute. So they helped get those 732 over the line. And when I wrote the last one, the 732, I posted that on Facebook that I was done. That was quite an accomplishment.
Well, what were some of your favorites of all
Oh,
of
well,
these?
that's pretty easy. I can think of 4 or 5 right off the top of my head. One of them was I wrote one about autocorrect. And I have a little devotional book that our Lutheran church puts out called Christ in the Home. And I keep ideas on my telephone. I have a little app on there that where I can keep notes. And so I would type in Christ in the, and autocorrect would pop up some words. And one day, one of them was shower. And I thought, now, why would Google think that the next word after Christ in the would be shower? But I wrote about it. I wrote about the disciples holding big vessels of water and Christ scrubbing up and singing old time psalms or something. And so I made a fun blog out of that, and it turned into a devotional in the book. Another one of my favorites was when I was working with what we used to call battered women. Now it's called domestic violence, but I transported a 62-year-old woman from from her farm home where her husband had beat her mercilessly for years, finally decided to leave him after their only child was grown. And I transported her there, and we were so worried she wasn't going to fit in because everybody else there were young mothers with children. And that woman fitted in perfectly. She started cooking. She had all kinds of wonderful recipes that she knew by heart. They bought her all the ingredients. She made comfort food for those girls, young mothers. And then she was the ex officio grandma for some 35 children that were displaced and staying in that shelter. So that was a wonderful one that I wrote. And then another one I wrote was called Good Humor Truck. And those of us who are of a certain age remember the Good Humor Truck driving around, or any ice cream truck that used to come to our neighborhoods and bring treats. Well, I wrote about that. We saw on a car auction that they were selling a Good Humor Truck. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a wonderful memory. So I wrote about that, and I wrote about how we can, even though there aren't good humor trucks anymore, we can be good humor people in our neighborhoods. And then probably one that I really liked that isn't on the list I gave you, but I'll give you this one, is called Christmas Mondegrins. And that was about a mondegrin is a word that we hear in a song or a poem or spoken, and we misunderstand it and think it means something entirely different. And it came from a song, it's actually an Irish ballad, I guess, about a man that was buried on the green. But they said, in the poem, they said they laid him on the green. And the woman that wrote the article about what that meant to her, she said she thought they said something about Lady Mondegrin. So the Mondegrin was born. And the best one that anyone can remember, I wrote it at Christmas time. The best one is Gladly the Cross-Eyed Bear, which is a Christian hymn, but children have taken it to mean a bear named Gladly who had crossed eyes. So that's an example of a mondegrin. And I just talked about how Christ doesn't make, he doesn't have mondegrins. He makes things very clear. And that's another way that I got a lot of my stories, is that really, my book was reviewed at one point when my memoir, which is called Then I Am Strong. This book is about me going through some very tragic events in my life, as you know, Nadia. And when I wrote that book, it was eventually reviewed about a year after it was written. It was reviewed by the Minnesota Women's Press. And they said that my book told stories of wisdom, strength, fear, joy, and risk taking.
Oh, absolutely.
And you know, Jesus told stories of wisdom, fear, strength, and risk taking. The whole Bible is full of stories about that. And so that really made it easy for me to write these devotions, because I could take anything, the Good Humor Truck, a joke about how we pronounce words and how we hear words, any of that, and I could find something in the Bible where a story was told. Now, I'm not as eloquent as the Dr. Luke who wrote the Gospel of Luke, and I'm not as loquacious or wordy as the Apostle Paul, who wrote his letters with sentences that sometimes went on for half the page. But I was able to take the best of what I had to work with, which is myself, and to write those devotions and make them come alive for people. And that's why people ask me to put them in a book.
You know, you did a really good job of tying those stories into the thread of Christianity, and I really appreciate that. And you make it seem so effortless, but there must have been difficulties. What was the hardest thing about pulling this book together?
Well, there were times I will tell you that there are some devotions that I never finished. I got an idea, and actually, the ones where I got an idea that was really from maybe a Christian writer or something that kind of tied my own brain in knots, those were the worst to try to bring alive. A lot of I do have some that are that get hopefully get people thinking about their own um, faith walk and about their doubts, and some of the misgivings that they have about their own faith. But I trashed a lot of those, and I guess that's not a very good word. I set them aside, I guess, but I just gave up on some of them because I just couldn't tie it together and make it really zing. So that was one of the hardest things. But then this last crunch, I ended up with a pinched nerve in my low back, and I could not sit for a period of time. And I was frantically trying to get these blogs done for the book so that I'd have enough. And it was very difficult. I did have an injection, and that helped immensely. But I couldn't take a pain pill because then I couldn't think. So though that the last home stretch was probably the most difficult part of writing that book. But other than that, it really was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I'm going to miss it. I've decided to retire from blogging, so I'm going to miss it.
From blogging, but you do have, as I understand, you do have another book in the works. We only have about a minute or so left, but I'd like to hear what that new book is going to be.
Yes, I'll make it very short. It's going to be a young reader book about my dad's sister, my aunt, who was a prisoner of war with the Japanese during World War II in the Philippines. She was one of the Bataan nurses. And we'll let the audience look up about the Bataan Death March and how the Americans hid these prisoners for several months in the jungle before the Japanese captured them. It's an exciting story, and I want to make it for a young reader.
Thank you for watching with us. We'll see you next time on Where Women Talk with a brand new guest.